Your information station, WTIM.
It's the WTIM Morning Show. I'm Avery Cooper, your host. Your stream brought to you by Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark. People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first. I have school board candidate Ann Chandler in studio. Welcome into the studio.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you here as well. So the April consolidated elections are kind of right around the corner. They're coming up in early April, let's call it. And one of the things that the consolidated elections handles is the school board, and that is why you are here today. So, Ann, tell me a little bit about your experience and why you decided to run for school board.
All right. I am a Taylorville resident that lives in Taylorville Township. I've been in town for 32 years. I came to Taylorville to be principal of West School, and I was there for 15 years. And then left and went to other districts to be a superintendent of schools for 6 years. So I've had a total of 38 years experience in education with a good background in school finance and school law. As I watched the district proceed over the last few years, I had great concern about spending. It seemed as though there was a lot of spending going on without somebody really on the board aware of school finance, because school finance is very tricky. I also am running for the students because I believe that in many cases our students are being overlooked and not treated and their education not maximized as it should be. Example of this is with the federal funding a school has received. There've been over $4.2 million that's been spent on building and facility acquisitions. There was $1.2 million that was spent on staff, but a large part of that was the special ed staff, extra special ed staff, because the district did not want to go with the special ed cooperative. So there was extra money spent there. Only $230,000 was spent on materials for students out of this total. And the district still has more that they can claim. So those are big concerns for me, that we need to do something. And that's why I ran, because I feel it's very important to get someone on there that has some knowledge on school finance and some background.
Well, you also spent a lot of time as a superintendent in various districts too. Where did you spend time as a superintendent?
I started out up north at a little district called Nettle Creek with 2 years. For 2 years, it was a K through 8 district. I then moved on to a unit district at Depew, Illinois, where I was there. I was the finances. I love the finances on it, but when I left that district, they were $1.1 million ahead of when I started, and we had new programs. The buildings were improved. We'd also won a federal grant of $6 million for the school. My last year was spent at Morrisonville, and I moved back here just to be close to home because my residence was always here. And that's when I retired.
And tell me a little bit about what you feel because I think you would know this a lot better than I would, what you feel as a member of the school board, what your role is, if say you are elected.
Okay. The role of a school board member, one of the biggest things, and you take an oath for this, is financial oversight. It doesn't necessarily, and you make decisions that are in the best interest of the school as far as the finances are concerned. So that's one. And number two, you need to be well informed of what is going on. You need to have all materials and all things in front of you so good decisions can be made. So I think in part of it on a school board member is to have good common sense, to have all the facts in front of you, and then make decisions based on that, as well as just simply asking questions about things.
And I guess how much does that vary from school board member to superintendent? Just from based on your experience and your knowledge, just trying to provide a little bit of background.
You have
it's the same kind of job, but I guess what is on top of the school board member? What does the superintendent kind of do?
The superintendent is in charge of the district, in charge of bringing ideas to the school board that she does want passed, and it's the big ideas and the budget. That person is responsible for the budget, how it is conducted, how it's run. That person needs to know about school finance and all the rules involved. There are a lot of rules involved in it. School finance is tricky, especially with funding. So the superintendent is the person who actually runs the district. The board is the person that is the oversight and approval of a lot of the big projects.
So in a way, the board is, for lack of a better term, part of the check and balance of the superintendent.
Yes, they are check and balance, and also with personnel, et cetera. So yes, that's exactly right.
Okay. I just think that's important to establish as we get into the rest of the conversation here, what we are all doing is for the school board. So just so everybody knows. And I think you've alluded to this in your opening statement about your positions of the budget and whatnot, but it's just me asking you a little bit more bluntly. How do you see the Taylorville School District budget at this time?
Well, with the federal funds, this helps save them. But what I'm seeing with a lot of these expenditures are, as I alluded to in 2005, we were 3 days out of what we had 3 days of money on hand, in essence. I believe right now they're saying 180 days, but these federal funds were been for children for a lot of different expenditures. And yes, there was some to be put on buildings as well, but they hired people with those funds and used those funds, which they were told not to do. Don't hire anybody with those funds you cannot sustain. The federal funding is going to be gone by 2024. And that's millions of dollars that they won't have access to. So the concern is with this, with the monies they're spending, they need to take a close look at this project that they have going to see exactly where they're going to be at. And there should be, the superintendent should provide for the board like projections, 3 to 5 year projections on where they're going to be financially. So that's a big concern as to where we're at with a lot of the expenditures that have been made.
What other concerns or maybe less so concerns, if you have less, do you have about the Taylorville School District that you hope that you can address? I know obviously financial and physical health is very front of mind, but I want to know a little bit more. Like, what else are you paying attention to when it comes to Taylorville School District?
Well, what I'm paying attention to is the students and how we're providing for our students, and if we're using our staff effectively, if we're using our special ed cooperative effectively. That is a big concern of mine. We have a lot of good teachers in this school system, but are we using them effectively? Just like with this federal funding, summer schools, after school programs, tutoring, what really are we doing to get student achievement up? Because if anybody has looked at the scores, the district is not doing very well. So just looking at students, we've got to do what's best for students. And I'd always told boards that I worked with, if we make good decisions on the basis of students, it's a win-win for everybody.
I want to preface this question with it very well may be something that you don't know the answer to. And so if you don't know the answer to it, just say so, because I don't know the answer to it myself. So I can't anyway. I guess you mentioned the scores, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do they compare to other scores in the area and districts in the area in terms of those testing scores that you alluded to and how they're not quite up to where they should be?
I haven't done it. I haven't done a deep dive on that.
Okay, but they are below the state standards.
They are below the state standards. And we had a lot of students, a lot of schools during COVID that were low. Kids did leave, they lost achievement. And that's why with this federal money, it was supposed to help boost that. So that part has been a universal problem. But the scores for Taylorville were low even before the pandemic.
And you think the pandemic probably exacerbated that a bit too?
It did, because they had remote learning. And unlike the Taylorville district was out for almost a year, other districts went back sooner than that. And it's just showing through research that the face-to-face education is much better than remote. Teachers did the best job they could on the remote. It's a difficult situation, but they'd had no training. They'd had no plan to go into it. So it was hard for everybody.
Yeah, and kind of a learning process for many school districts too.
Exactly.
It's pretty tough. And I think we can all look at the results of that and say, yeah, that had a pretty big impact on our kids. And not at this time, because we got to take a quick time out. In a moment, I want to ask you a little bit about your ideas and plans to kind of reverse that in a way, for the lack of a better term. I'll give you a moment to kind of think about that. Your stream brought to you by Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark, and People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first.
WTIM. Your information station. WTIM.
It's the WTIM Morning Show. I'm Avery Cooper. Your stream brought to you by Landmark of Taylorville. You'll always do better with Landmark, and People's Bank and Trust. They put people first. April consolidated elections are right around the corner in Christian County, and part of those consolidated elections involves the election of the school board and a couple of school board members. One of those up for election, Ann Chandler. She is a challenger for the school board, and we're talking about some of the issues of the day for the Taylorville School Board here in Christian County. And what are some of your concerns for the school district outside of fiscal health? We mentioned a little bit of the students too. What are some of your other concerns?
One of my more recent concerns has been the building that they want, the Fine Arts Sports Complex Center. It isn't the building per se; it's the way they've gone about it. The board knew they had $13 million to spend on this project. The architect's estimate of this project came in at approximately $18 million. Actual bids came in at $23 million. They went ahead, though, before that and started asbestos abatement when kids were present. That's a real health concern. And now they're talking about, apparently at the last meeting, they realized that they cannot do the full project because they do not have the funds. And so they voted to go ahead and demolish the part of the building. To me, they needed to take a step back, use good common sense, get all their facts, get everything in order before any more decisions are made, because they've spent a lot on architect fees. They've hired a construction manager. There's just been kind of reckless, and it's been kind of hither and yon spending instead of a good solid plan in place. So that's been a big concern. I think they just need to step back, take a look, and decide what can and what cannot be done.
Yeah, I think speaking of stepping back for a moment, I think we all should step back for a moment and realize that if you are elected to the school board, that you're just one member,
Mhm.
and you can't necessarily change anything directly about the school board just as a member of the school board. You're more of an advocate for per se. So, what would you advocate for differently per se when it comes to this project? Understanding that the east wing of that high school did need something done to it. What that was, I don't have an answer for. So I guess how would you have advocated for this project differently?
I think what I would have advocated for is using the financial oversight, and you take a look at, okay, I only have $13 million. Obviously, if the architect is saying it's going to cost 18, why would you begin something when you know you're a minimum of $5 million short to begin with? To me, I would have advocated, so let's take a look at the school finance, let's get our funds in order, and then let's begin this whole process of taking a look at what we needed, taking a look at what the East Wing did need, instead of going hither and yon on it. Just take a good practical look at that. Also, I think with this project, transparency and communication with the taxpayers, with the school community, even with the school board was lacking. They would have meetings, committee meetings. People wouldn't know where the room was. And in some cases, the public was locked out. They couldn't even get into the meeting, which is not legal for Open Meetings Act. So to me, advocate for financial oversight, common sense, figure the plan before you start the plan. That I would advocate for, as well as advocating for the best education possible for our students. I'll always advocate for that.
And I think one of the things with the East Wing is that it's so structurally damaged that they felt that they had to do something like sooner than later, right? But
Mhm.
at the same time, from what I'm hearing from you is that did we have to do it right now before we had a plan in place? I'm just trying to
Exactly.
characterize that.
Exactly,
Okay.
because the asbestos removal in itself was not a reason to not have classes back in there. But apparently with some of the structural part, there was a reason. But you still don't have to have students in that wing, but you don't have them in there right now. To demolish and even to whatever they decide to construct there is still going to take a year or more. So a little bit more time of stepping back, developing the plan was not going to make any difference in anybody's lives.
I think you've kind of encapsulated your stance on the project and the finances. But really quickly, because we are running out of time, I wanted to give you a chance to tell me a little bit more about what you would advocate for if you were on the school board.
I would advocate for board members to be good board members, for board members to be their own person, to ask the questions, make your decisions. You don't have to side with anybody in particular. State what your voice is, and just use good common sense when it comes to this whole project. So I advocate for that as far as being on a school board, to be your own mind and to listen to other people who have comments and talk with them and encourage the transparency and communication, because that, to me, that's huge if taxpayers and school district members know what's going on.
And what do you briefly here, because I have about 30 seconds, if you can do it, what makes you different from other school board candidates?
What makes me different is I understand school finance and I understand school law and what it should and should not be. And I have actively served on boards, not only school boards. When I've run districts, but I've worked on the public library board and other boards as well. So I have a lot of experience in that area.
And I almost forgot there's an important announcement that you have about the ballots.
Exactly. On under Taylorville Township, and it's not marked very clearly on the ballot, you can only vote for 2 people. So remember that when you're voting under Taylorville Township, for 2 people. And I would certainly appreciate a vote to better our schools.
That's Ann Chandler. She's a candidate for the Taylorville School Board. Thank you so much, Ann.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
WTIM.